Hey guys, welcome back.
We're back.
Back to the MK9 show.
Yeah.
The Spicy Dog Podcast.
Spicy Dog Podcast. So today Michelle, do you have a better way to word it? You had a really good way of saying it.
I think we were talking about going through like some anecdotal stories on techniques or methods or things that we've done with specific dogs that would maybe be looked at as like more controversial than others in the realm of like dog training, or maybe even in the realm of balanced dog training, that ultimately have been extremely successful and poignant in the moment and have been like the catalyst for the success of that dog. And in some cases, even as extreme as like saving their lives ultimately, and that being like the piece of the puzzle that kept them with their family or in their home or things like that. Yeah. Or just like a big pivotal piece of success overall with their training program. Yeah. I know I can start with one. I would say with Doppler. Doppler was one where, I have a couple of them. So I have he was like an American Bulldog mix that had really, really severe aggression issues and towards anyone outside of his family. And a lot of times, so typically what we'll do is we'll muzzle the dogs and then we'll handle them to see like what is the actual intention behind the reactivity they're giving us. And because most of the time, once you take the leash from the owners, it fizzles. Like they don't actually have much like commitment behind it. But with him, he was very committed. And generally, my initial go-to is to just let them like work that out and let it run its course and then be done. Because usually, if you don't feed into the behavior by interacting with it much, and you just show them that it's not going to get anything out of you and it's not going to like accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, which is you leaving, they usually stop because they're like, oh, well, that is what it is type of thing. So with him, one thing that I ended up having to do was, because I mean, he spent the whole first session, an hour long, continually trying to bite me over and over and over. And I mean, these were really big lunges, like up at my face. I was covered in bruises and everything from that. So when we met again the next time, I was like, okay, so the riding it out technique is just not really going to work. So we put an e-collar on him, and I put it all the way at 100. And as soon as he acted aggressive towards me, I held the button down for probably 6 to 7 seconds, and gave him a big fat correction for that. And then the whole rest of the session, he didn't try it again. Yeah. So
was it always only when you took the lead, or was it like even just like working like leash pressure, he would like snap?
Anything. You know, I mean,
it was just because it was you, like it wasn't because of the parents?
Yeah, so I mean, just the presence of me.
Okay.
I mean, this was a dog that they were walking at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Because anything.
Yeah.
Like wildlife, dogs, people. He never would redirect on them. Okay. So it was just very intense lunging and barking
like
and biting.
Kill something or somebody and really got into that mindset.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I would have been
like if you didn't have
that
muzzle on.
Yeah, and there's footage of it and stuff. Paige filmed that lesson, which ended up being very lucky, because I think we were debating not to, depending on if we thought it was going to be interesting content. But turned out rather interesting. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, he was very serious about it, and so it had to be addressed. You know, he would just get stuck in this like loop where it was just like very intense. So we did really heavy e-collar correction for that, and I think that was the first time in his life that he had ever had any type of answer for that behavior. And he was like, oh shit. And then he saw everything very differently from that point on. And that's not to say that it was an instant. Like, he never did it again. Yeah. But like, it 100%
Alter that
was
behavior.
was
Behavior.
absolutely.
Yeah. No amount of positive only training is going to fix a dog like that. And I get that somebody from like an outside viewpoint might be like, this dog should be put down. But why? Something that I don't get is like, we just turn dogs away, or we just be like, oh no, they need euthanized because we can't work on that, rather than trying alternative methods that can ultimately save their life.
Yeah.
And like really provide people with peace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And these, both of those examples are both dogs that, like, every other thing has been like tried. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like these are like, these aren't usually techniques that you use for like, okay, a dog like lunged one time at someone and you're like, we're gonna do, you know, I mean, these are like extreme cases where like Doppler, where it's just like an hour straight, he was just trying to maul you.
Yeah.
You know, or like Mosley, it's like he can flip that switch, and it's a lot of times when they get that amped up or whatever, the e-collars don't even do anything. So having them kind of choose those, it's very two clear options. You breathe, or you continue to try to kill me. You know, or whatever.
And it's like the, you know, I think Lima is its own thing, but like that least invasive, minimally aversive thing, I don't really subscribe to that, but like that is kind of the approach I try to take.
Yes.
You know, where it's like, if I can go a route that is the least confrontational and like the least extreme, then obviously I'm going to do that.
You want to not have to have that conflict unless like you really have that type of personality of dog that will meet that conflict with conflict.
Yes.
And again, I think that's something that we, just like as trainers, are good at, is like reading those situations, you know, and like, and obviously hearing it from the owner of like, okay, what are we trying to work here? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, Doppler, it's like, okay, we need to do something immediately, or Mosley, but it's...
Yeah, I mean, both those dogs would have been put down.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
100%. And Ruger as well. I mean, he was...
Oh, yeah.
He was another one, that big Corso. That was biting even his own family members and like stuff like that. I mean, he is now living his best off-leash life on their farm they have now. Their owners came to get him from daycare or boarding, I think, the other day, and like made me cry in the lobby because the husband, I'd never gotten to meet him before, and he came in and he was like, you saved our dog's life, and like gave me this whole thing, and I was like, you're making me cry at 10 in the morning at work. But yeah, I mean, and with him it was I don't know that there was anything like Ruger is one of those dogs, we were talking about this a little bit, Bridget, where it's like you have some dogs where you can pinpoint the moment where like things changed, where you're like, that was the moment when they like, you really could see the shift, you know?
Things started to go uphill.
Yeah, and then there's dogs that like, you can't pinpoint it. It's just, you remember they were here and then all of a sudden they're here. And you're like, like everything we did.
But subtle changes over time, that it's not just like one outlying factor that changed the dog's behavior, and it's not very clear sometimes, but it's a mix of a bunch of different things that you've changed with your dog or the relationships you've done.
Yeah.
And sometimes like dogs that are that headstrong, like Mosley, Doppler, or Ruger, there has to be a point that they know you're the leader and there's no question. Like that's not, we can't leave the dog to just be like challenging us. Like they have to know that the consequence for that challenge and those aggressive behaviors is absolutely not going to fly. And that's how you get over it with the dogs of that caliber.
Well, because you have to think of it as, so like when you look at how you're correcting a dog, you have to think, so like, what is aversive about the correction? So like an e-collar correction is, I mean, it's a pain aversion, right? It's uncomfortable. And then even like a bonker, which we'll get into. Bonkers are startling. They're not painful.
Physically painful.
They're not painful. They're you know, they're startling. So they function more off of like a startle reflex. So it's like dependent on the dog you have and their personalities, or even a lot of times their breeds, you kind of have to find what type of correction is ultimately going to be like the most aversive for them. Because I mean, I don't think I've ever met a Rottweiler that an e-collar correction was effective when they really didn't want to stop doing something. You know what I mean?
Oh,
because
I absolutely
pain
agree.
doesn't matter.
Yep.
They don't care about pain when that stuff happens.
And there was
so
dogs
with
that fuel from
exactly.
that
If anything, it amps it. You know, I mean, there's most true pit bulls are not stopped by e-collar corrections. Most Rottweilers are not. Most confident, intense German Shepherds are not. You know, so it's like you have to find, dependent on their breed and personality, and almost play off of like their strengths and weaknesses, like what's going to be aversive to you. Because I mean, what's so funny about Rottweilers is like pain does nothing, but you throw something at them and they're like, I'll never do that again, I'm so sorry.
They freak out.
You know, you throw a piece of cotton towel at them and it's like the end of the world. But
and I think people look at stuff like, and I want to say like the dominant dog collar is meant to be used like 3 to 6 seconds.
Yes, like
so
not very long at all.
So when people think of the aversive tools like the dominant dog collar or the bonker, they're very concerned because it looks so aversive, but it really is what's working for that dog in the moment. Just how like in schools and stuff, everybody learns differently. We have to teach children differently. We have to find what's motivating. Not that dogs and children are the same, but it falls under the same principle of what is working for this individual.
Yeah, for
what
sure.
What can we do to help this individual dog start to have some reprieve in that really aggressive forward behavior?
And it's on top of like finding what will they find aversive to stop a behavior or to address something. I think it's also important, and this was with a dog that's here for a board and train right now that had really, really bad crate reactivity. The key to him was figuring out what he found reinforcing about it and being able to not only punish and do an aversive, but remove any reinforcement he could also be getting simultaneously. So like for him,
from the reaction,
so like what he would do is he would react at the kennel door, and then if you corrected him with an e-collar, he would then attack the door even more, and you could get into this battle with him where he was like, well, every time you correct me, I'm going to attack the door. And so the reinforcement for him, the game kept going because the door was there, right? And again, I don't recommend everyone does what I'm about to say, because unless you really know the dog isn't going to be a danger to you, it can not be smart. But what I ended up doing was he reacted, I corrected, and as soon as he attacked the door, I just opened it. And I've never seen him look so baffled. Because he was like, and he just stared, but he was like, what in the world do I do now? Because the whole reinforcement aspect of like, I can argue with the door was taken away. And so he just kind of stared at me and he stopped. And then I closed the door. He reacted on it again as soon as the barrier was back in place. I corrected him and then I opened the door. And we did that about 4 times. And then since then, at least to my knowledge, I think each person that's interacted with him involving the crate has had to do that same process. Basically almost prove to him that like everyone's going to do this now. And now it's been like a drastic change in his behavior. And now you can, if he were to get reactive, which his reactivity, the likelihood of him reacting now is like way lower than it has been. But if he were to get reactive and you give him a correction, he doesn't fight the door anymore. Because he knows what happens if he fights the door. He's like, well, it's not going to be there anymore. So the fun in doing that is gone, basically. So sometimes it's not only about like finding something that's aversive, and sometimes like we could have looked at that situation, and I think for a period of time we did, where we were like, well, the e-collar just isn't working. And it's not that the e-collar couldn't work, it's that we weren't also removing the reinforcement that he was getting simultaneously that was outweighing the motivation of being corrected at that point. And so sometimes I think too, like if you find that like your correction isn't working or whatever you're using to correct with It might just be that you have to look at the whole situation and be like, or is my dog just somehow still getting reinforced in their behavior they're doing somehow, and do I need to adjust something else too?
Yeah. Like, an example that's non-aggressive example is that I'm working with 2 golden retrievers that have a lot of separation anxiety from their owners, which even in the course of our session, they can't be 10 feet from their owners without like completely losing their minds. And it's kind of sad, like, and it's all out of love. It's all out of like, they really spoiled these dogs, and there's nothing inherently wrong with loving your dogs. But if we create a dog that can't be 10 feet away from us, that's not fair. So one thing that I was exploring is that we were doing some like sending to the bed, and then I realized that the dog would go to the bed. If he left the bed, he'd get the correction, but he'd fly over to the owners, and he'd still have the reinforcement of eventually getting there. And we'd kind of have the conflict of pulling him away, and he'd be like, I don't want to leave Mom and Dad. Very unhealthy mindset for a dog to have. And then I realized, why am I creating conflict by being close enough to the owners that this dog is at least successful for 5 seconds to get over to the owners? Because yes, he still got the correction. Yes, he's was affected by it, but he still got what he wanted. So something I've been exploring is putting a long line on and doing that same process, and then they cannot get all the way to the owners, so the reinforcement is kind of gone in that aspect. And I've seen a beautiful result from being able to do that. But it's very powerful. Like little details like that, like the crate door, the going to the owners, just kind of like go over it with a microscope, and you be what in this moment is reinforcing the dog.
Yeah, because there's even stuff that I've will pinpoint even in sessions is like when you give a command and the dog's in command, and then they break the command, and you correct them for it and you put them back. A lot of times, even just unwitting, like you're not even realizing, the owner will like pat them on the head or like retreat them or whatever. And it's so important that like if you're having to give a correction for them making a wrong choice, that you're not then following that up with more positive reinforcement.
Like getting, like
Definitely.
you're saying, like dogs breaking a bed stay, and naturally people will go and reward the dog again. But at what point does the dog say, every time I get off the bed and I get back on, I get to choose the reward pattern of which I'm getting rewarded?
Yeah, especially if your dog, if your dog is very food motivated, or say your dog is extremely clingy and affectionate and unhealthy and unhealthy in that way, the what you think is being positive punishment in that context is almost negative reinforcement, because you're making them go through something difficult to get what they ultimately wanted. So you're turning what should have been positive punishment into negative reinforcement to then get the good thing that they needed.
Right.
And obviously that's more convoluted than it needed to be, but those are like the weird things that I think about in my head, where I'm like, oh, so you think you're punishing something, but if you then follow it up with a reward that far outweighs the aversiveness of the punishment, then all you did was add a little bit of pressure, you know what I mean, that they had to push through to ultimately still get what they wanted at the end. So it's like you reward your dog the first time they do something successfully. Anything thereafter, if they make wrong choices, it's just corrections and putting them back into position or whatever it might be.
And then once they've completed the duration and stuff, then you can reward again. But,
Yes.
but that's another thing too that I find, having to explain, is that like I see a lot of times they hold the duration, they do great on the bed, they finally get it, they go and release, and then they go and give them the treat, or then they go and give them that reward. It's important to give that reward when they're still on that bed before releasing. Like, hey, that's what I liked, right?
Yes.
Instead of at the okay.
Instead of, okay, run to me and then I can give you that, right? And because I feel like for the dogs that can be really confusing as to what am I getting rewarded for, right? I just held it on that bed and got nothing, but then once I got off the bed, I got that reward, right? Yeah, so I feel like that's a big key to it. But
it's like looking at the big picture and then looking at the small details, which I know is like kind of an oxymoron there, but like that's what you want to do. You want to look at it from different scopes, like if we're struggling, like what about this dog, like you're guilty of this too, that will lay in bed and be like, that session didn't go the way that I
Yes.
wanted it to. What can I do to improve that session? And we're thinking about sessions a lot of the time outside of work and how can they improve. And I think if you're a person that doesn't want to grow, you're not going to do that. But having those moments of being like, what is going to be effective in our next session?
Yeah.
And I think I was talking to you that Buckfield is a dog I've been working with that is highly aggressive in his house. And in his hour session, we really struggled with the beds. And that was just getting on and off the beds. This dog just seemingly wasn't getting it again. Separation anxiety, wanted to get back to the owners. And I felt the whole session was a bust. And I was like, we didn't really get a lot of success. But he came for daycare and we started the bed stays. And this dude did perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like not always having the results immediately and realizing sometimes those tough sessions come with like a rainbow at the ends of the storm or something, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well that was, and then I've talked about a similar situation with a Great Dane that I'm working with that is huge and physically really powerful. And when she's so friendly and nice, but she just sees something and she's like, I'm gonna go over there.
And with their strength and stuff, people are being dragged down.
Yes, and so they have, the walking has been like her biggest struggle, and so they were feeling a little better about it, so they took her to like a towpath, and they were like, it was horrible. Like, it was so bad. Like, we were hanging on for dear life, we're giving her the corrections, like, it just felt like every time there was something new happening, it just started all over again. Like, we just didn't get any success at all. And I was like, okay, let's go to Edgewater. Like, let's see. And I put a prong collar on her because I was like, you know, we might need to go back to prong just for those moments when we need a little extra oomph behind our physical capabilities.
Yeah, with a dog that big.
Yeah, exactly. So we did that preemptively just in case. But ultimately, like, we didn't have, I gave her one e-collar correction right at the beginning at 100 because I was like, we're not messing with this. And then the whole rest of the time we were at Edgewater, she was brilliant, no more corrections, did great, scooters, dogs, bikes, and all of the stuff that they were like, oh, these were all of the things that were setting her off. And it was, again, another thing where I was like, well, you didn't struggle for nothing. Like, obviously, whatever you did, even though you felt like it was pointless and it didn't work, she learned from it. You know, she took that experience and she was like, okay. And that's where it's sometimes like, and I think that's where those are the differences in the dogs where you can't find the moment, is because it's less about them having this come to Jesus moment where they're like, I will never do those things again. And it's more about them realizing that you're going to be persistent. And every time I step out of line or I do little things here and there, it's always met with that very consistent response from my owners or my handlers. And you just see that adjust like over time.
Yeah, I think like the consistency with whatever training method you're using, whether you're force-free or your balance trainer, the consistency, like you have to have something that's consistent with the dog, and you can't just expect your dog to do it 3 or 4 times and then they're good.
Right.
You know, you have to really pattern in things.
Or even the consistency of having that good success, and 3 or 4 months down the line, you're not doing as much, or maybe there's something, a small thing. Like, I was working today with nails with a dog that had just gone home. We were doing a follow-up, and when we were doing the nails, we're correcting for it. We kind of used kind of what David had showed with putting him on the bed and doing that and working through it. And before he left, it was super successful. First follow-up, the owner wanted to kind of go through it too.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it, and he was doing really good. But after at about the second paw when we were working, he kind of was licking my hand a little bit, and then just patted his mouth on me. Wasn't even a full put his mouth on, my hand in his mouth or anything, but just kind of like that. And those little things, people are like, okay, well, at least he's not trying to viciously attack me, so it's it's fine. But it's but even that stuff I corrected him for, because he knows that with like, because we were so consistent with it before, he knows he's not supposed to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And so he's trying, dogs are very opportunistic and, they will try to push. Yep, they will try to push. And even though it's not super vicious and it wasn't harmful, it didn't hurt at all, it was something where it's like, I see what you're trying to do. Like I see you're trying to push those limits. Mm-hmm. And so it was something still very like a firm correction with the e-collar still. Yeah. And then he was fine the rest of the time. But it was those little things that they will try to push,
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's where you're like, my firm boundary is no teeth on skin. Mm-hmm. So that's it. Doesn't matter the intensity of it. Like you're not allowed to do that type of stuff. That's similar to like Legend who boards.
Yep.
Like when I run him, he's a Corso who boards with us, did training with us, and honestly couldn't go anywhere else. Like he's not a very stable dog, and so anytime he's not in his kennel, he's muzzled. And we have just a few people here that run him, so everyone is at the skill level they should be, and he's we have a very routine thing for him. It's very regimented. It's very predictable. Everybody does the same thing, because what sets him off is like things that he's not expecting.
Spooked, and then when he's spooked, he
bites. Yes. Yeah. And he's a very large dog. So, but anytime I run him, like from when I started running him, when I started working here, I don't allow him to touch me at all. That was like a hard boundary for me, because I was like, and again, if you've worked with dogs long enough, you've probably met a dog like this and you'll know what we're talking about. But he's not a dog that, unless you're like his owner, that is stable enough that you could ever feel confident that you've gotten to a point where he would never do that to you. Mm-hmm. Like he's just not that type of dog. So it's like, and I would venture to say that in some of the situations where people have thought that he would never do that to them, that's when, oopsie.
That's good.
It's like
some things have happened.
Winning him over. So we used to have an employee here that thought that like because he gave him treats and Legend was responding to the treats, and then Legend does that thing, you guys know, that he like rubs on you, and you could look at that and be like, oh, he's so cute, he likes me now we're past the worst of it. It just took that one interaction and him and I are cool now. It's not how dogs work.
That's not how
this dog is not stable enough that like the smallest little thing could set him off. And if you didn't believe that he would turn back at you, no matter how many treats you gave him, no matter how much positive reinforcement you gave to him, he would take that and be like, I got you. I got something on you now. I can make you pet me.
Yeah, and so for me it was like, I don't want him feeling like he can touch me in a inappropriate way or a negative way when he's spooked or he's scared. So I'm not even going to allow him to interact with me in like a positive way or like a friendly way, because it's business. This is business. We're not buddies. I'm not your friend. Like I have very specific things like. And he gets time out while he's here. We do walks. We do all the things we would do with any other dog. It's just our relationships with him are very different, because that's ultimately what works the best for him. You know what I mean? And he benefits from that. That we keep it very like strict and regimented.
Because then he doesn't have that chance of unpredictability. He doesn't come out already nervous of like, okay, what's going on? He comes out knowing he's going in and down, he's getting the muzzle on, and then we're going to do whatever we're going to do.
So,
yeah, I agree. I think it's helpful for us so we know, but also in the same sense for him. Because that's what works.
Yes, and that could be something, I don't know, to go with our theme of today, that could be looked at as like overkill.
Yeah.
Like you're going to correct him for like nudging you for pets?
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Because he's not allowed to do that.
I think it just like speaks volumes that you can't have one formula for every single dog, and you have to look at individual dogs, and like some dogs could get away with like head scratchies and treats, and that's how we can build a relationship with them. Not all dogs are like that, and just because you're seeing those behaviors of your dog does not mean your dog would never turn on you. Think of how many people you hear that die of dog attacks of their own dogs, or dogs that kill their children, or dogs that kill their other dogs. It was once a dog that loved them and was snuggling on the couch with them, snuggling in bed with them. These are animals, and animals are unpredictable, and to not recognize that is just insane.
Yeah, well, they don't have like a sense, at least in the same way that humans do, they don't have this sense of like undying loyalty.
Mm-mm.
Like it's like everything is like a pecking order for them, you know. And if you're just so happen to be in the way of them feeling like that's just how they are.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
mentally
If they see
what
you
it
as
is.
equal or less,
Yeah.
they're gonna try to one up you. You
Yeah.
know?
Exactly.
And that could go as far as like an attack, and that could go as far as like begging for food or or whatever. You know, it's like
or running
it's
away.
right. Yeah,
Because they have the option and
Yeah.
they just don't want to listen to you and you tell them to come back or you know things like that. So
yeah.
We have like multiple dogs that we work with. Like we work with a lot of behavioral mod cases, so we have people that have not been able to have people at their house for years, or they cannot take the dog out. They have to walk the dog at 3 a.m. And these are serious cases that I'm sure you could look at and be like, this dog should be euthanized, but it's just not that easy. It's not that easy to be like, I can't solve your problems with treats, so you need to be euthanized because you don't deserve to live. Like, of course, euthanasia, behavioral euthanasia, has its time and place, but I feel like we should try things.
Yes. Well, there are cases where I'm like, this dog just, no.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to like describe exactly what you're seeing in that case.
Yeah, it's usually a combination. I mean, for me, it's like there's something neurologically not there.
Yes.
And then on top of that, coupled with just like a lifestyle that cannot accommodate a dog like that.
Prepared for that.
Yeah, I would say, but again, that's so rare. Most of the time, it's you just have to figure out what formula is going to work for the training of the dog and also the lifestyle of the owner to be able to accommodate whatever they need at that point. But yeah, I mean, I think people jump so quickly to behavioral euthanasia when you don't. You skipped so many rungs of the ladder before you just went straight to that at that point.
And recently, within the last year, I've had a dog that went through a training program, and unfortunately, they had decided to euthanize the dog, and it was really freaking sad, and it was horrible for everybody. But we realized at some point that the dog wasn't stable, and there was no set trigger, because we can always kind of think of what triggered the dog in that moment.
Yeah.
But this dog's triggers were changing day to day, and anytime you told the dog to do anything, he'd turn around and start biting. Yeah. And that is not a dog that should.
And it was like severe biting.
Yes, kept alive. And that goes to show these people fucking love that dog, and they spoiled him, and it was really hard.
Yeah. Those are really difficult situations because as the dog trainer, you're like, how do I fix this? How do I make this work? It's really hard. I've had a couple situations like that too, where it's like, I don't know.
Right.
And I hate having to say I don't know, but sometimes we just don't know, or, we're just not able to find the way that it just magically all works together, and you don't have these issues anymore, and it's really difficult.
You can't lead in the situation like with love, and expect things to work out, and just trying to get on your dog's good side all the time because it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, and it's something too, with it. It comes a point of training as well as certain situations management, as well, and so it does depend on situations, of like if that dog. I know we've talked about this in other podcasts, but like if it works in your lifestyle, you don't have kids, you live by yourself, whatever, and it can be managed with the training that you've incorporated, then that's one thing. But you get in those situations where it's been manageable, but now there's a kid on the way, or now we're moving in with someone, or whatever,
things.
and that's when I think it really gets hard, and like you said, it sucks to say we don't know, but there's not a playbook. There's not a book you can go through and be like, okay, so these are the exact steps we need to do with this dog, and boom, it'll be perfect.
At least want to say that we tried everything that we could in our power to help the dog, and improve the life. But there's so many factors, and one thing that you should never risk just for like your ego side of, I fixed this dog. Some dogs cannot be fixed, and you just have to be like, we have to consider the safety of everybody involved, and I can't willingly say that this dog is okay to be living in this
Yeah.
situation without giving that person my opinion of like
Yeah.
I think that we need to call it with this dog.
Yeah, it's like an ethical thing at that point.
Mhm.
Like I
It
can't
is hard.
tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
You know, I wish I could,
Right.
but I can't. And I also, it's like, it's hard because there are no, like you were saying, there's no like 100% certainties with anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
it's exactly.
it's overwhelming at times because I'm trying to take as much information that I know about this dog, that I know about you guys, combine that into my educated guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? On like what this dog is or isn't capable of.
Yeah.
And that's like very stressful at times.
Yeah.
Especially
And that's where,
dealing
again,
with all those factors.
kind of falling into the topic again of like, we're balance training and our go-to tool is the e-collar, but it's something where we might have to try a couple different options, you know? If again, like the least invasive possible, perfect, that would be ideal. But sometimes we do that and we're not seeing what we need to, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, so another piece, let's switch this up, let's try this technique, let's whatever, find a new game plan and see if that works. And so that's what you were saying with like just like exerting all the options. Like if you're just trying one thing and it's not clearly not working and you're not trying to change anything, whether it's the tool you're using or the way you're going about it, you know, that we were kind of touching on, you know, then it's, I don't know, I think
having
it's a little less.
like support in your corner, like as your trainer, the people that you're working with to try different things and be like, okay, that didn't work. Like, let's all go back to the drawing board and see if we can make this adjustment. And sometimes those adjustments are really helpful and can really thrive. And other times you're realizing that like this person cannot handle this dog in a safe manner. And we have to, you know, give our best opinion on that. And I remember that particular case, the people came in and they boarded the dog as an emergency boarding because it had an incident. And they were like, we're going to go to this behavioral clinic and we're going to try Prozac. And I remember being like, guys, Prozac is not going to help you. Medication is not going to make your dog not aggressive. It's so much bigger than that. Just like antidepressants aren't going to make humans magically so happy. There's going to be a lot at play. You cannot depend on one singular method with a dog like Ruger or Mosley. It's pinpointed. If we only use this all the time, it could be a combination of making sure Mosley has his e-collar on, making sure we have Dummett dog collar on, and that we're muzzling him in public. It's a little combination of things that made it successful. Or Doppler.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, there's something to be said for the dog. It's with certain dogs, it's stemming from the respect aspect of the handler and the owner. Because like even with Bandit, that bloodhound mix, I told this story on another podcast, so I won't go into it of what his first lesson was like, where it took the whole lesson for us to just get the muzzle on because his owner couldn't do it. He was biting her daily at that point over just whatever he felt like, you know? And that first lesson, I mean, it was brutal. It was ugly. I mean, the first half was just getting the muzzle on with a very like hands-off technique of 2 long lines, the grabbers, doing all that kind of stuff. This dog's pooping himself, peeing, freaking out, all that kind of stuff. And then the last half was doing double muzzle drills with the muzzle already on, pretending to put another one on with corrections at 100 on the e-collar if you try to bite me. Because I was like, this stuff needs to happen for us to go any further at this point. Like there has to be consequences for your biting on a whim for her to be able to do this at home. And I had the owner run those same things. And that week, she was able to actually put a muzzle on and off of that dog.
And Bandit can safely come to our daycare now.
Yeah, he's at daycare all the time. He's not muzzled. We use it sparingly at times, like if we have a new staff member occasionally, stuff like that. But like ultimately, it's not a requirement for him at this point. He's made huge progress, and I mean, he was on his way out. 100%. You know, like she was so defeated. She's like, if this doesn't work, like it is what it is. you know, she wanted to give it a shot, thankfully, but.
Look at those pivotal moments, like, in our career, we very much know that it's not rainbows and butterflies and treats and kisses that solve dogs' issues. It's being that leader and providing those rules and consequences to behaviors that are unacceptable and inappropriate.
Yep.
And once we get past that, do you think that she has to correct Bandit on 100 every day anymore? Absolutely not.
No.
He's to a point where he's stable because he's fucked around and he found out.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly
She's
what
not
it is.
having to micromanage
Yes.
so much
So
anymore,
long term, like, people shit on balance trainers and they're like, fallout's gonna happen, you're abusing that dog, blah, blah, blah. And you can have your opinions, talk your shit, but that is such a minuscule amount of that dog's timeline. And if we're looking at things and we're constantly having to do these huge corrections and be this really, like, strong-handed person, we're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
We should be able to provide that consistency and have our dogs respect us, but it shouldn't be something we feel like we're having these big arguments weekly with our dogs because something's wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and guess what? Fallout can't happen if the doggy's dead.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if the dog's on its way out anyways, like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why people are so against, like,
Giving
I
her
don't
that
agree
option.
balance training should be a last resort for dogs, but if in any context you allowed somebody to give it a shot, wouldn't it be if the dog was going to get euthanized anyways?
Right.
Like, what's the harm then?
Good
People
point.
think it's,
You know?
doesn't, like, it's mean and the dog is suffering, and I can promise you it's not that. Like,
Yeah.
our dogs,
If it's done right.
all of our dogs that we work with as trainers, like, love us. And, like, when my dogs see me, they come to lessons, their butts are wagging, they're
Yeah.
happy to see me. I don't ever want to be somebody that a dog is afraid to work with.
Yeah.
Like,
Fallout isn't happening.
yeah.
If you go to somebody who knows what they're doing,
Mhm.
Fallout isn't happening. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's a myth. It
It's
doesn't happen.
propaganda.
It is, honestly. It doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my pups get very excited when they come for the follow-up.
Yeah,
There's
your
the-
pups
there's the
love
fallout.
you.
Yes.
Them being excited and happy.
And you said no rainbows and butterflies and treats and kisses.
Mm-hmm. It can be about that when your dog gets to a point that
Yeah.
you know you can.
I make it
reward,
a goal
Mhm.
for myself and the dog.
But
Me
at
and
the,
Eden we're
Yeah.
getting there. We're getting there.
but Eden also knows that, like,
Yeah.
she
I
can't
mean,
fuck around.
yeah. Oh yeah, she knows. Yeah, she knows
And
that
she
she
did
does
good.
it. Yeah,
she's
she's doing
improved so
great.
much in the last, like, week and a half. where
Yeah,
Huge.
not even a whole
Yeah.
week.
She'd
Yeah.
go ballistic if anybody came through the door, and now
Mhm.
she's like,
Now she gets
"Hey,
excited.
guys."
Yeah, it's awesome. But there are certain tools that are necessary
Yeah.
for certain situations.
And I won't ever feel bad about that.
No, because we've seen the benefits of what it
helping
does,
dogs, yeah.
and we've seen the happiness from the owners, and we've seen the happiness from the dogs once they get that confidence and understanding of, oh shit, I've been doing it wrong the whole time. Like, why didn't someone tell me earlier that if I were to maul this person, I was gonna die? You know, why did someone not tell me, like, oh, if I could just go and chill on that bed while those people hung over with mom and dad, you know, whatever, whoever.
They're like, I'm
Then
10
we can be
feet
fine.
away, and
Right.
I'm not dying.
Yeah,
I'm not in mom's
Uh-huh.
arms.
exactly.
But yeah, there's some of our things we did that people probably wouldn't like.
But helped.
I think it's
Definitely
important to
not.
be transparent in the balance training world, and if you're working with a trainer,
Yeah.
they should make you feel like it's okay to ask questions,
Mhm.
and you should start to see ways that it is succeeding. I don't want to go to my 10th lesson and we get absolute no success. Like, we need to see that the methods that you are using are working, even if we have to brainstorm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're gonna
And
see
nobody,
success.
you should never feel like your trainer is like doing things and not telling you about them.
Yeah.
Why they're doing
like,
it.
yeah, we use techniques here in certain ways, but we are always like very transparent with the owners and the clients on like what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Mhm.
And if for whatever reason, I don't think I've ever had anybody say no, you can't do that, because usually by the point we're implementing something, one, I have a good enough relationship with them that they trust me and they trust my judgment, and two, they want what's gonna work. They're
Mhm.
ready.
Mhm.
They're like, please, whatever we need to do, like I will do it, and I don't take that trust lightly. You know, that's why we're so introspective about what we do here and making sure we're doing it properly. But you shouldn't ever feel like your owner or the client, the trainer, is doing something like shady and they're not being forefront or like honest with you about what
Yeah.
they're doing with the dog.
Absolutely.
That would be a red flag. Even if what they're doing isn't bad, why aren't they telling you about it?
Yeah.
Why don't they feel comfortable telling you type of thing? So,
Exactly.
but yeah.
That's it.
Thanks for joining us again for another episode
Hope
of
it was
Spicy Dog
educational.
Fun,
Spicy dog.
Yes.
the Miracle Canine Training Show.
Yeah. Have a
Hope
good
everything-
day, everyone.
Good day. We'll see you back soon.